Hey folks, I'm finally in college! I'm a big boy now! I'm in a closet.
So this is my dorm room. Oh, and here's my roommate Corey. How's it going, Corey?
Fuck off.
Okay.
Pokemon Platinum, where would I be without you? I was big into Pokemon as a kid. I don't remember exactly how I got into it, but I'm assuming it was from the anime or the trading cards or something. At any rate, when I would go over to my friend's house and watch him play Diamond and Pearl on his DS, I thought, this is the coolest shit ever! And I just had to play it for myself. That Christmas, I was fortunate enough to get a DS that I shared with my older sister, I kept it to myself mostly, and a brand spankin' new Pokemon game. Unfortunately, that Pokemon game was Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia, and I got pretty upset pretty quickly when I found out this was not the game that I wanted. Thankfully, sometime later, I finally got my hands on the legendary title that originally sparked my love for video games, Pokemon Platinum. I was pretty hot shit back then for having it. I remember several kids in my class being all like, "Whoa, you have Pokemon Platinum?" And I was like, well, yeah, it's the latest Pokemon game, what's the big deal? I later found out that Platinum was actually the enhanced version of Diamond and Pearl, and that most of my peasant peers were jealous that they were stuck with an inferior product. Pokemon Platinum gave me countless hours of fun and a ton of memories as a kid, and replaying it is always a lot of fun. It's my favorite video game of all time, and each new playthrough is a joyride of great gameplay and nostalgic bliss. Of course, it's not perfect. Video games age, and at 11 years old, Platinum is bound to have some issues that may lessen the overall experience if you have the nostalgia goggles off. As I find my way through a new, challenging phase of life, I thought I'd revisit some of my old favorites and see if the artistic masterpiece I remember playing when I was 7 still holds up today. I was happy back then. Our adventure begins in the small, quaint town of Twinleaf, where we meet our rival, whom I named Brendan after the guy who's been haunting me for all these years, after he barges into our room unannounced. Come on, man, I could have been jerking off in there. Do you know the tween bro code? Our adventure really begins after we talk to the parents for a few seconds and venture just a bit too far outside our isolated community and step into tall grass without Pokemon. Professor Rowan shows up to scold us, and it makes me wonder, if we still don't have a Pokemon of our own and it's too dangerous to go into the outside world without one, how do we get food? Yeah, Pokemon's world building has always been kinda lackluster. They never really take the time to flesh out the details of society or day-to-day life in the Pokemon world. That's not to say they don't put in any effort at all. In fact, they go to great lengths to put a lot of locations and game mechanics into the context of a cohesive world, but there are so many little things that just don't add up. So many little details that either have murky and incomplete explanations at best, or go completely unanswered. Like, is there a government? Is there an economy? Do any of these people have jobs? Do we need to eat, sleep, or go to the bathroom? Why does my mom have a room? And why is everything so fucking small? Seriously, these settlements are tiny. Twinleaf Town has 4 houses in it. That's not a small town, that's a cul-de-sac. At any rate, we swear up and down to Rowan that we in fact think Pokemon are pretty neat and finally get our starters. I went with Piplup since it's my favorite Pokemon, and we promptly ensue the first rival battle Spamfest Spectacular. We return home and I talk to my mom for one of very few times throughout the game, and she finally gives me the running shoes. God, why do you have to unlock these? What is the purpose of making me move painfully slow for the first few minutes of the game? After we finally gain the ability to move faster than me in the morning, our rival gets the bright idea to capture a legendary Pokemon at the nearby lake. After encountering some weird guy named Cyrus that I'm sure we won't have to worry about later, our rival realizes that, before we attempt to tame a legendary beast of godlike power with our weakling pets who can barely battle their way out of a wet paper bag, we need Pokeballs. We just need to take a quick detour to Rowan's lab, get us some balls, and we'll be capturing a deity in no time. Oh, do we want to name our starter Pokemon? Pingu. Perfect. So, we never really follow up with Rowan on the whole Pokeball situation, huh? The whole reason we went to his lab in the first place is to get balls for catching the legendary lake Pokemon, and the game just never touches on that again. He just tells us to complete the Pokedex and then we're off on the adventure. Dawn, unhelpful as always, shows us what a Pokemon Center and Pokemart are and tells me to tell Mom about my fun adventure before I go. I tell my mother that I'm leaving and will probably never see her again, and the rival's mom gives me a parcel to take to our old pal in the next city. We meet up with Dawn again, who, in the time-honored Pokemon tradition, gives us an unskippable tutorial showing us how to catch a Pokemon, and at long last it seems like we have some room to breathe. Not too long after, I catch myself my first new party member, a trusty Starly that I've decided to name Falco. I've always liked Starly. I pretty much always use one whenever I play through Platinum. It's decently strong throughout the entire adventure, and it's especially helpful early game for fighting grass types that Piplup can't deal with. Well, after making our way through Route 202, we finally reach Jubilife City. It's a pretty nice place with great music and an overall very relaxing urban environment. There isn't a ton to do here, but we have our first run-in with Looker, the only evidence that this place actually has laws or a police force. He's apparently an agent of the International Police, traveling the globe and catching bad guys. We'll see more of him later, and though he isn't a hugely consequential character, I'd still find him an amusing addition to the adventure. We then meet up with our rival and give him that parcel from earlier, which contains 2 maps, one for him and one for me. Awfully convenient. He gives us the word to head to Oreburgh City next, but before we do that, I decided to quickly explore Route 204 to the north. There isn't much here except a few trainer battles, and you can't progress any further until you get an HM, so off to Route 203, I guess. Here we again encounter our rival, who challenges us to another battle that actually turns out to be more than just spamming one move over and over. And I think now is a great time to talk about how fucking slow this game is. Good god, it gets to be mind-numbing. I enjoy Pokemon battles, they're fun and the mechanics and strategies are well designed, but couldn't they be just a little faster? It's not that bad at first, but eventually it gets to a point where you're fighting constant battles over and over and seeing the same menus and flavor text over and over, and I'm really grateful I'm playing this on an emulator. And this goes beyond just battling. Yeah, spamming the same moves and watching the HP bar go down at a snail's pace is annoying by itself, but this is a trend throughout the entire game. The text is slow, movement is slow, navigating menus is slow, using HMs is slow, loading is slow, going through tall grass and water routes and caves is slow because of how absurdly high the encounter rate is. I'm aware I can be a bit of an impatient person, but I know I'm not the only one who has this problem. It's one of the most common criticisms of this game, actually. Honestly, just chilling out a bit and using the emulator's speed up function when necessary helped mitigate a lot of the frustration with slowness for me, but it still wears on you after a while. And if you're playing this on an actual DS, you're shit out of luck when it comes to speed up options. After beating our rival, we trudge through the next route in a small cave and finally enter Oreburgh City. This town is based around a coal mine, which is one of the few pieces of evidence that there's any sort of economy in the Pokemon world whatsoever. I actually really like the aesthetics of it though, with the piles of dirt and moving conveyor belts and overall industrial theming. That is, until you actually have to enter the mine to find the gym leader and get... Yeah, here we get our first taste of what it's like to go through a cave in this game. Every step you take, every goddamn tile you tread is a dice roll. An absurdly high encounter rate coupled with the annoying amount of time it takes between when a battle starts and when you can actually flee and return back to the overworld makes cave exploration in this game absolutely miserable. It's easier to deal with later in the game when you can actually afford a decent amount of repels, but at this early point in the game it's a fucking slog. At least I found some cool new Pokemon here. See, I first went up to Route 207 and caught myself a Machop, which I creatively named Choppa. After I went into the mine and realized that Machop doesn't really add anything to my team at this point in the game in terms of type coverage, I decided to pick up a Geodude instead, which I named Dwayne because I'm funny. But then... the Great Onyx Disaster of 2020. Onyx is a decent Pokemon, and I'm always a sucker for rare encounters, so I thought, hey, why not? But this fucker took an ungodly amount of time to capture. I could not fucking catch it for some reason. It just wouldn't stay in the damn ball. Only after 10 minutes and a lot of soft resets was I able to catch it with a Dusk Ball that I'm not quite sure I got this early in the game, to be honest. Still pretty bizarre that it took so much time and dice rolls to catch a level 9 Pokemon in a 4 times effective ball though. Certainly didn't help make my cave spelunking less of a miserable grind, that's for sure. I decided to name it Disaster in honor of Jay Witz's own Great Onyx Disaster from his 2013 X and Y playthrough. Shout out to him, by the way, that Let's Play kept me entertained many times over. I highly recommend if you're looking for something to watch. Another funny story about Onyx, actually. One time way back when I first played through this game, a friend of mine, actually the same friend that I watched play through Diamond and Pearl before I had the game for myself, traded me an Onyx. He said I could give him one of my garbage team members, and I think I traded him a Bidoof or something. Little did I know, he was only trading me the Onyx so he could evolve it. So just as I ecstatically watched my sweet new Onyx evolve into a Steelix right before my eyes, he asked me to trade it back. I was eventually able to get a Steelix of my own, but the feeling of betrayal I felt in that moment, never forgave him for that. Anyway, after we find the gym leader and convince him to actually do his job, we're finally able to challenge the first gym. Gyms have gotten a lot of flack from some critics for never really updating their mechanics or format throughout the series and being really easy to sweep with a single type, and while true, I still have always kinda liked gyms for some reason. I feel they have a certain charm to them, and they serve as an actual tangible marker of your progress throughout your adventure. Whenever you beat a gym, you know you've reached a milestone, and I've always appreciated that. Platinum's first gym leader, Rourke, is kind of a pushover. He carries on the time-honored Pokemon tradition of the pathetically weak first gym leader that uses rock types, which allows them to get wiped by 2 of the 3 starter Pokemon. My Piplup is one of those too, so I was able to make pretty quick work of him. His Cranidos almost gave me a bit of trouble, but not really. So we beat Rourke, and surprise surprise, Pingu evolves! Evolution is one of my favorite mechanics in Pokemon games, the anticipation of knowing your Pokemon's just one level away from evolving, or the excitement of not knowing exactly when it'll evolve. Evolving Pokemon is a small thrill every time. I always find joy in watching my party members grow and change into a new Pokemon with better stats and new moves, and it's a nice representation of you and your team's growth throughout the adventure. Pingu evolves into Prinplup and learns Metal Claw, which is a nice move to have for type coverage at this point in the game. After that, Rourke gives us our very first gym badge, which allows us to use Rock Smash. I don't think there is a single Pokemon player who doesn't hate HMs. HMs function to lock certain areas of the game until you've done the proper parts of the story, and can give certain locations more depth with optional sections that are accessible with certain HMs. And that's all fine and good. I see the necessity of blocking off parts of the game in order to ensure proper progression through the campaign. And I honestly enjoy the extra layering that HMs give to certain routes and towns by giving you something to come back for after you've unlocked the right HM. Here's the problem. HMs are Pokemon moves. This forces you to waste a move slot on a perfectly good party member, or forces you to waste an entire team slot to travel through much of the game. Also, HMs are permanent. You can't forget them like normal moves until way later in the game when you can find a dedicated move deleter to get rid of them. This means that for most of the adventure, you're stuck with these dogshit utility moves that, with few exceptions, are almost worthless in battle. Also, there are 8 of them! 8! That is the equivalent of 2 entire Pokemon solely for using HMs. I opted to spread them out across my entire team, with some dedicated for lesser used HMs later in the game that I would swap out as needed. So I was able to have a full team of 6 for my adventure, but I had to make a lot of tough decisions on which party members to switch out at what time and what moves I was going to live without. But fuck, why couldn't these just be items? Honestly, HMs are probably my biggest problem with this game and Pokemon games as a whole. They're so limiting and so annoying to have to deal with. It's a frustrating reality of every Pokemon game up until Gen 7 when they finally figured out that there were better ways of controlling player progression. Although I'd argue that in terms of HMs, the Sinnoh games are the most egregious of the bunch. Anyway, access to Rock Smash allows us to progress through Route 204, which was previously blocked off as I said earlier. So we head back to Jubilife City, and who else do we find but Looker? He tells us he's found no suspicious characters in his investigation of the city, but that we should keep an eye out for shady grown-ups. I found him. Doesn't look like his investigation was very thorough. This is our first run-in with Team Galactic. They're this game's mandatory evil team that's going to be the main source of conflict in the plot. They're sort of made out to be comic relief villains and more of an incompetent nuisance than an actual threat. The grunts for the most part are, but I honestly enjoy all their strange mannerisms and funny dialogue, and they have some pretty kick-ass music. These 2 grunts here are demanding Rowan and Dawn hand over some research materials. Naturally, Rowan says no and starts talking trash, and we have a quick double battle with Dawn to settle our differences. They'll go on to cause some bigger problems later on in the game, but crisis averted for now. After that kerfuffle, we continue up through Route 204 and finally break those accursed waist-height rocks in the ravaged path to progress forward. It's a pretty short route the rest of the way, with just a couple of trainer battles and not much else. Falco evolved into Staravia here though, so that's something. At long last, we reach Floroma Town. This is definitely one of the better locations in Sinnoh. It's so relaxing and has such a nice atmosphere. I really like how the region is spaced out with smaller thematic settlements in between the big gym cities. Gardening is the big gimmick here, with flower fields covering the entire town and surrounding area, and a berry shop where we get a watering can and a couple of berries to start us out on our planting escapades. You can plant berries at various locations throughout the region, which over time will eventually grow into multiple berries. Berries can have a variety of effects in battles like restoring HP or PP and curing status effects, and can actually be used as a held item so you don't have to waste a turn on healing. They're nice in theory, but I hardly ever use them, and they're pretty sparse throughout the region unless you put in the effort to plant and harvest them. But I don't really have the vigilance or care to do that either. See, usually when I plant berries, I'll have forgotten about them by the time that I can actually harvest them, and I don't really return to areas that I've already visited, so it's unlikely that I'll just happen to come across them. But even in the event that I remember they're there, I'll probably be too lazy to actually go and get them anyway. I mostly just stick to buying potions. So first we have to head out to Route 205, where a little girl tells us that Team Galactic has taken her dad hostage at the nearby Valley Windworks. We go over there, fight a Galactic grunt, and learn that we have to go back to the meadow near Floroma Town to get a key from some other grunts in order to actually access the Windworks. We find two of them harassing some guy and demanding honey. We quickly take care of them and get our hands on the key to the Windworks and some sweet, sweet honey, not sponsored, although I wish I was. Honey can be slathered on specific trees throughout the game to attract Pokemon. It's a neat little mechanic and actually the only way to get certain Pokemon like Combee, Heracross, and Munchlax. But it's got a lot of the same problems that berry planting has for me. It takes 6 hours for a Pokemon to appear after you place down the honey, by which time I've usually forgotten about it or have at least forgotten which tree I actually put the honey on. And I'm usually too lazy to go back and look for it. It's also on a time limit where whatever Pokemon you attracted will disappear if you don't check the tree within 24 hours, and the timing seems to not work out for me a lot for whatever reason. I also don't particularly care for most of the Pokemon that you can get through honey trees anyway, so while I see its value, it's just not for me. Works key in hand, we head back to the Valley Windworks to have our first major confrontation with Team Galactic. The Galactic Grunt Gauntlet is something that happens a lot in this game, where you have to storm one of their bases or some area they've taken over and then battle one of their leaders at the end, which isn't a criticism or anything, I just thought it was interesting to point out. Here we fight our way through a couple of grunts and face off against Commander Mars for our first big Galactic boss battle. This fight was a bit more annoying than I expected. That Purugly was a bitch to deal with. It wasn't insanely strong or anything, but it was unreasonably bulky and my attacks barely did any damage. Thankfully, I was eventually able to overcome the feline menace, run Team Galactic out of the Windworks, and free the hostage. Only after does Looker show up to investigate, whereupon he finds out that a literal child did his job better than him. I know it's a bit of a tired refrain at this point to ask, why is a kid tasked with saving the world, huh? Isn't that wacky? Isn't that a wacky plot hole? At this point, you just kinda gotta accept that it's a children's game set in a fantasy world, and the developers probably wanted their target audience to relate to the protagonist rather than cater to the fun police. But at the same time, he's 12. Looker then tells us that Team Galactic has a hideout in Eterna City, which is also where we find the next gym. And with that, we're off to continue our quest to beat the Pokemon League and eliminate the bowl-cut spacemen. I can't wait to see what the future holds.
Michael. Huh? Can you shut up? I'm in a class.
Guess we'll see you in part 2.
Part 2?